My name is Amber Nolan. My older sister pushed me out of my wheelchair at our family Christmas Eve dinner party and said, "Stop pretending." It happened right there in the middle of the living room, with the Christmas lights still blinking and the whole family watching. One second I was sitting there, the next I was on the floor, my body hitting the cold tile while laughter erupted around me. 2 years ago, a car accident left me needing this wheelchair. The doctors said my spine took serious damage and I would need time to recover. But from the very beginning, Ivana, my older sister never believed it. She thought I was exaggerating everything just to get sympathy and a bigger share of the family assets. Our dad sided with her most of the time, and the tension between us had been building for months. This Christmas Eve, Mom decided to host a big dinner party at her luxury condo in Florida. She wanted everyone together for the holidays. I was nervous, but I still went. I told myself it was just one night. What I didn't expect was how fast things would spiral the moment my sister walked over to my chair. 2 weeks before the party, I picked up the phone and dialed doctor. Marcus Hale, my orthopedic surgeon. He answered on the second ring and asked how the pain had been lately. I told him the truth without holding back. Some days, the discomfort eased slightly, but the numbness traveling down my legs continued to appear without warning, and any attempt to stand for more than a few minutes still ended in failure. Doctor. Hale listened carefully, then reminded me that the damage to my spine from the accident required additional time before full mobility could return. He recommended I continue relying on the wheelchair during extended social events and steer clear of situations likely to increase physical or emotional strain that might delay progress. I brought up the Christmas Eve dinner my mom had planned at her condo in Florida, Doctor. Hale took a brief pause. He recalled the family difficulties I had described in earlier appointments. He suggested establishing firm limits early if any discussion drifted toward sensitive topics. I thanked him for the guidance and ended the call, carrying a mix of relief and lingering concern. Later that same afternoon, Aunt Paula called. She was my mom's younger sister and often stepped in to maintain balance whenever conflicts arose. Aunt Paula wanted to know whether I had made up my mind about attending the gathering. I confirmed I would go despite the hesitation inside me. She shared that Mom had already extended an invitation to Dr. Hale because their paths had crossed regularly at local charity functions over the years. Aunt Paula believed having one more level-headed individual present could help ease the overall mood. Our conversation shifted to details about the planned menu and the festive touches Mom intended to add throughout the penthouse space. She expressed genuine enthusiasm for bringing the whole group together during the holiday season. After hanging up, I turned my attention to packing the suitcase for the trip. I selected outfits with care, double-checking that I had packed sufficient medication along with the spare battery charger for the wheelchair. The flight reservation to Florida sat confirmed for early the following morning. While closing the zipper, I reflected on the recent pattern of communication. My older sister Brielle had forwarded multiple texts that cast doubt on the necessity of assistance for routine activities. My dad Thomas frequently responded to those messages with brief statements encouraging me to exert greater effort. Each exchange added another layer of discomfort that lingered long afterward. The next morning, I reached the airport ahead of schedule. The security process required extra time due to the wheelchair, yet the personnel handled everything with professionalism and patience. Once on board the plane, I gazed through the window and mentally reviewed past disagreements that had accumulated over time. Brielle had grown accustomed to receiving priority in family matters since childhood. With questions of shared assets now surfacing, the distance between our perspectives had widened noticeably. I kept repeating to myself that my mom, Nancy, hoped the evening would proceed smoothly for everyone involved. Upon landing in Florida, the humid air greeted me immediately as I maneuvered out of the arrival area. The arranged transportation brought me directly to the high-rise condo complex located in the downtown district. The building staff assisted with the bags, and I took the elevator to the top floor. Mom greeted me at the entrance with warmth and a careful embrace. She guided me to the prepared guest room, offering a clear view of the coastline. The large Christmas tree stood decorated in the main living area, its lights casting gentle reflections across the expansive glass panels. I arranged my belongings in the drawers and took a short rest to adjust to the new surroundings. That evening, Mom and I sat together at the kitchen counter while she went over the names of those invited. She verified that my dad, my sister Brielle, Aunt Paula, and Doctor Hale had all accepted. I listened quietly without adding many comments. Privately, I questioned how much longer the surface calm would hold once conversations deepened. The day after arrival moved along without major incidents. I assisted Mom by organizing table settings and selecting background music suitable for the occasion. Aunt Paula joined us in the early afternoon to help with food preparation. She carried bags of fresh produce purchased from a nearby market and shared light stories from the local community to maintain an easy atmosphere. We coordinated tasks efficiently in the wide kitchen area as daylight faded outside. As the hours drew closer to evening, the familiar tension began building again in my chest. I understood that Brielle and Dad would reach the condo before long. Their opinions regarding my ongoing limitations had stayed consistent, and discussions about future inheritance had surfaced repeatedly during recent calls. Nevertheless, I convinced myself that enduring a single meal remained within my ability. By the moment the initial doorbell sounded, the entire space carried aromas of seasoned poultry and warm spices. I remained in the guest room for several additional minutes to collect my composure before wheeling myself out to meet the arriving guests. The evening before the party, I settled into the guest room while Mom finished last-minute arrangements in the main area. She called me out to help review the overall layout for the next day. The dining space had extra extensions added to the main table so all guests could sit without crowding. Mom walked through the planned arrangement and asked whether the spacing worked for easy access. I pointed out a couple of adjustments that would allow smoother movement around the room. She made the changes right away and stepped back to check the flow. Dad showed up soon after with several bags from his afternoon errands. He set them down and gave Mom a quick greeting before turning in my direction. He brought up the latest update from the family attorney regarding the trust paperwork that had arrived days earlier. Dad noted that the current figures supported a steady long-term plan, but a few specific terms still required group input. His delivery remained even though the content carried clear implications. I stayed quiet and let him finish the point. Mom attempted to redirect the focus toward the planned dishes for the dinner, and she described each course and the accompanying items in detail while checking the oven temperature at the same time. Dad acknowledged the list but returned to the trust matters shortly afterward. He highlighted how equal portions might overlook differences in past family contributions and mentioned specific examples from previous years. The exchange remained polite on the exterior while the underlying tone grew recognizable to everyone present. Aunt Paula entered the condo a short time later, loaded with additional supplies from the local market. She embraced Mom warmly before approaching me with a friendly smile and asked about the travel details from the airport. Aunt Paula offered to pick up anything I might have forgotten during the packing process. I appreciated the gesture and assured her the arrangements were sufficient for the short stay. She moved into the kitchen area and started sorting the fresh vegetables and herbs while sharing light updates from her daily routine to maintain a relaxed environment around the group. While preparing ingredients side by side, Mom noted the expected arrival time for Brielle the following afternoon and wondered aloud if the traffic would cause any delay. Aunt Paula responded positively and commented on the benefit of having the complete family present once more for the holiday celebration. During a brief pause in the activity, I glanced at my phone and discovered a recent text from Brielle. The message raised concerns about the continued need for support with everyday activities and implied the recovery period had extended beyond reasonable expectations according to her view. I scanned the words again before closing the screen without sending any response back to her. Dad remained at the counter examining additional pages from the folder he had carried in earlier, and he read selected paragraphs aloud at regular intervals and sought Mom's perspective on particular sections related to asset division. Mom offered measured replies as she attempted to consider multiple viewpoints without taking sides too quickly. The dialogue shifted between projected financial outcomes and earlier family choices that had shaped the current situation. I occupied myself with positioning the table decorations to keep busy and avoid direct involvement in the discussion. Aunt Paula sensed the gradual change in the room and proposed adding some instrumental tracks in the background to soften the atmosphere. She paired her device to the speaker system and chose a collection of calm seasonal pieces that played at a moderate volume. The music provided a gentle layer as we proceeded with the remaining tasks in the kitchen and dining area. We shaped the cloth napkins into basic forms and aligned the drinking glasses in orderly lines along the surface of the extended table. As darkness settled outside, the three of us gathered at the kitchen counter for a simple bite to eat before the main preparations continued. Dad introduced another aspect concerning property assessment and the potential impact of economic shifts on upcoming allocations within the trust. Mom paid close attention, yet guided the subject back toward recollections of earlier holiday gatherings to balance the conversation. Aunt Paula recounted an amusing incident from the previous season to diffuse the mounting pressure that had started to build. I added brief remarks when directly addressed, but primarily followed the interaction without expanding on any particular point. Closer to midnight, Mom went over the complete sequence for the upcoming meal service and verified the timing for each dish. She checked the schedule for when appetizers would be served and the sequence in which the main courses would appear at the table. Dad returned the papers to their case and remarked that deeper subjects could remain aside until the festive period concluded so everyone could enjoy the evening. The comment appeared sensible on its own, yet the atmosphere stayed subtly tense with unresolved questions hanging in the air. I stepped away to prepare for rest in the assigned room after helping with the final kitchen cleanup. I checked the phone messages a final time before placing the device on the bedside table and turning off the light. The weight of the next day's event increased steadily with every passing hour as I lay there thinking about possible outcomes. The following morning unfolded with steady activity focused on completion of all remaining tasks. Aunt Paula and Mom coordinated efforts efficiently in the cooking space while I managed accessible duties from my seated position at the counter set. We fine-tuned the illumination levels in the living and dining areas and positioned final decorative accents throughout the common spaces to create a welcoming feel. The preparations reached a finished state on the exterior with everything in its proper place. By mid-afternoon, the entire condo held the combined aromas of slow-cooked dishes and freshly baked goods that filled every room. We performed one last review of the table configuration to ensure nothing had been overlooked and double-checked the confirmed attendees against the original list. The sense of expectation grew consistently as time advanced toward the start of the evening and the first guests began to approach the building. The evening of the party arrived and the first guests began to ring the doorbell shortly after 6 o'clock. Brielle entered the condo with a confident stride, carrying a bottle of wine and a wrapped gift for Mom. She greeted everyone with quick hugs and immediately commented on how nice the decorations looked. Dad followed right behind her and shook hands with Aunt Paula before settling into a chair near the tree. The room filled with casual conversation as more relatives arrived and exchanged holiday wishes while removing their coats and placing them on the designated rack. We gathered around the Christmas tree in the living room where Mom had placed several presents in neat stacks. Brielle suggested we open a few small gifts before dinner to build the festive spirit and create a relaxed starting point for the evening. She handed out packages one by one and watched closely as each person unwrapped their item with careful attention. When it came to my turn, she passed me a small box and remarked that it contained something practical for daily use that could support ongoing routines. I opened it to find a set of resistance bands intended for physical therapy exercises, along with a note suggesting regular sessions. The talk soon turned to family updates as plates of appetizers made their way around the group. Brielle shared details about her recent promotion at work and the new responsibilities that came with managing a larger team. Dad praised her achievements openly and mentioned how proud he felt about her progress in the business world over the past year. Mom listened attentively and nodded along while serving additional appetizers from the kitchen counter to keep the flow going. Aunt Paula asked thoughtful questions about the new role to keep the discussion flowing naturally and showed genuine interest. As we moved toward the dining table, Brielle brought up the topic of future family plans in a casual tone. She asked whether everyone had considered how assets should be handled in the coming years to ensure fairness for all involved. Dad joined in without hesitation and stated that open conversations like this helped avoid misunderstandings later on down the line. He referenced the trust documents again and noted that contributions from each child should influence the final division based on documented efforts. The words hung in the air while plates were being passed around the table and glasses filled with beverages. Mom tried to lighten the mood by announcing the start of the main course with enthusiasm in her voice. She described the roasted turkey and side dishes she had prepared with care over several hours. Everyone complimented the food generously, and for a short time the conversation stayed focused on the meal itself and the flavors of each dish. Brielle, however, circled back to the earlier point after a few minutes and asked me directly how I planned to contribute once my situation improved in the future. Her question carried an edge that made the table quiet for a noticeable moment as forks paused mid-air. I responded calmly that my focus remained on following medical advice and completing the recommended recovery program step by step without rushing. Dad interjected smoothly and suggested that pushing through discomfort could speed up the process based on stories he had heard from others in professional circles. Brielle agreed with him immediately and added that many people in similar positions eventually returned to normal activities with consistent determination and effort. The exchange continued with both of them emphasizing self reliance and the importance of not relying on family support indefinitely as time moved forward. Aunt Paula attempted to change the subject by sharing a story about her own health challenges from years ago that had required patience. She described the steps she took to regain strength gradually and encouraged everyone to stay positive through difficult periods. Mom supported the new direction and asked about holiday traditions from different branches of the family to bring everyone back together. The tension eased slightly as laughter returned to the group during the dessert course when stories turned lighter. Brielle, however, did not let the matter drop completely even after dessert. She leaned forward slightly and commented that appearances could sometimes mislead others about true capabilities in everyday situations. Dad nodded in agreement and mentioned examples of family members who had overcome obstacles without extended assistance from relatives. Their comments built upon each other, creating a clear pattern of doubt directed toward my current limitations and recovery timeline. I kept my replies short and focused on finishing the meal without escalating the discussion any further. The evening progressed with more general talk about work projects and travel plans for the new year as coffee was poured. Brielle described upcoming projects in detail and the travel involved with client meetings across states. Dad offered practical advice on career moves and investment options that could benefit the whole family in the long run. Mom and Aunt Paula contributed stories from their own experiences to balance the conversation and prevent any single topic from dominating. The atmosphere remained cordial on the surface, yet the underlying questions about my condition lingered beneath every exchange like an unspoken shadow. As coffee and after dinner drinks were served in the living room, Brielle raised one final point about the importance of honesty within the family circle. She stated that pretending about health issues only created unnecessary burdens for everyone involved over extended periods. Dad reinforced the idea strongly and said clear communication prevented resentment from building over time among siblings. Their words carried significant weight and shifted the mood once more as the clock approached 9 o'clock and the night continued. I excused myself briefly to the guest room to check my medication schedule and take a short break from the table. When I returned, the group had moved fully to the living room for continued conversation near the fireplace. Brielle was in the middle of explaining her views on independence and how it strengthened family bonds through mutual respect. The discussion continued late into the evening with various opinions shared around the circle as the party showed no signs of winding down. The tension peaked about an hour into the gathering when Brielle stood up from her seat and moved straight toward my wheelchair with determined steps that drew immediate attention from the room. She stopped right beside me and looked down with a sharp expression that silenced several conversations at once across the living room. Her voice rose clearly as she questioned why I remained seated the entire time instead of joining the group activities more actively like everyone else present. Dad leaned forward from his chair across the table and added that the evening offered the ideal setting to show genuine improvement in front of the family members who had gathered. The statements carried strong weight while heads turned quickly and eyes locked onto the developing situation between us with growing interest. Brielle placed one hand firmly on the back handle of the wheelchair without any visible hesitation. She pushed it forward with noticeable strength, then pulled it backward in a sudden jerk that made the wheels lock unexpectedly on the smooth tile floor. I sensed the immediate loss of balance and grabbed desperately for the armrests, but the momentum proved too powerful to counter effectively. The chair tipped sharply to one side, and I slipped completely out, landing hard on the floor with an impact that resonated through the open condo space and caused a brief echo. Brielle stood directly over me and said in a loud, clear voice, "Stop pretending." The words sliced through the room as sudden bursts of laughter erupted from several directions, including from Dad, who released a short chuckle and shook his head as if the scene amused him greatly. Other relatives joined in with uneasy laughs and scattered comments, suggesting the moment looked far more dramatic than necessary during what was supposed to be a holiday gathering. The background Christmas music kept playing at a low volume while I lay on the tile trying to orient myself and push upward using only my arms against the smooth, cold surface beneath me. The laughter grew louder as Brielle repeated the phrase with increased volume and pointed emphasis directed squarely at me. She gestured openly with one hand and explained to the group that behaviors of this kind added unnecessary strain on the entire family over extended periods of time. Dad supported her statement right away by pointing out that those present needed to face the real situation instead of accepting continued reasons for ongoing limitations that affected everyone. More voices around the room contributed their own observations, building a collective wave of agreement mixed with additional lighthearted remarks that filled the air. I stayed on the floor, feeling the hard tile press against my side and the full weight of every gaze directed downward from the standing circle of relatives. No one moved forward immediately to offer any help as the laughter persisted, and suggestions started circulating about trying to stand up right there for everyone to witness in real time. The feeling of complete exposure spread quickly, turning the previous party energy into something far more uncomfortable and exposing for me personally. Brielle kept her arms crossed tightly and held her position with clear expectation, visible on her face throughout the exchange. She addressed me directly once more and insisted the time had arrived to demonstrate the true state of my condition openly to the whole gathering without further delay. Dad nodded vigorously in agreement and urged the others to watch carefully for any sign of real ability in that exact moment under the lights. The pressure increased steadily as additional relatives added their thoughts and encouraged the scene to keep developing without any interruption from outsiders. The seconds stretched longer while the initial wave of laughter slowly mixed into awkward murmurs and quiet side conversations among the guests who remained nearby. I could hear Aunt Paula speaking in a lowered tone to Mom somewhere nearby, but the specific words blended into the general noise of the room and became hard to distinguish. Brielle took one more small step closer and restated her demand with unmistakable frustration, showing through her body language and tone of voice as she waited. The entire group remained focused intently as the situation kept everyone rooted in place around the living room area. Comments kept emerging from different spots, suggesting different approaches to handle the moment immediately on the floor without delay. The deep sense of humiliation settled in fully while the shifting lights from the Christmas tree continued to play across the tile surface where I remained motionless for the time being. Brielle held her stance steady without stepping back and repeated the main accusation once again for stronger emphasis in front of everyone gathered. Dad reinforced the idea by briefly recounting an example of personal determination during difficult times he had witnessed before in similar family contexts. The combined statements created an atmosphere much heavier than before, replacing the earlier holiday spirit with open confrontation that hung thick in the air. I concentrated on regaining some composure while still on the floor and avoided making direct eye contact with any of the surrounding faces to maintain control. The tile felt progressively colder against my skin as more minutes passed without anyone offering immediate assistance or support. The laughter had mostly died down, but the ongoing stares and occasional additional remarks continued to sustain the heavy tension throughout the entire space without relief. The gathering had shifted dramatically in those few minutes from a standard holiday celebration into a very public test of personal credibility and truthfulness. Brielle waited with clear impatience showing for any form of response from me, while Dad kept nodding along in full support of her stance and position. The rest of the relatives continued observing the exchange with differing levels of involvement and visible discomfort on their faces as the seconds ticked by slowly. The laughter had barely begun to fade when a deep voice cut through the room from directly behind the group. "Doctor, Marcus Hale, my orthopedic surgeon, cleared his throat loudly enough for everyone to hear." He had arrived quietly a short time earlier through the main entrance and positioned himself near the back wall where he could observe the entire living room without drawing immediate notice from the guests. His presence surprised most of the relatives since only Mom had known about the invitation weeks in advance and had kept it as a quiet arrangement. Doctor. Hale took one deliberate step forward into the brighter area of the living room and spoke in a calm professional tone that demanded complete attention from every person present. He introduced himself clearly as the physician responsible for overseeing my spinal treatment and recovery process since the accident 2 years ago. The room fell into absolute silence within seconds as the remaining laughter disappeared completely, and all faces turned toward him with a mixture of confusion and sudden awareness of the new development. He continued without pause by stating the medical facts in straightforward terms that left no room for doubt. The injury involved significant and permanent damage to the spinal cord at a specific level that currently prevented any independent standing or walking for extended periods without risk, Doctor. Hale explained that the wheelchair served as a necessary medical support device to protect the damaged area and that any forced attempt to rise could cause additional harm or setbacks in the healing timeline. His explanation carried the full authority of documented medical evaluation and imaging studies and left little space for alternative personal interpretations from those without professional qualifications. Brielle's face shifted rapidly from confidence to visible shock as the words registered fully in her mind. She took half a step back from her position and opened her mouth to respond, but Dr. Hale continued addressing the group as a whole without allowing interruption. He noted that the action of pushing the wheelchair in that forceful manner qualified as physical assault on a person with a recognized disability and carried potential legal consequences under both state laws and federal regulations protecting individuals with disabilities in Florida. The statement landed heavily and changed the energy in the condo almost instantly from chaotic laughter to stunned quiet. Mom moved quickly from her position near the kitchen island and knelt beside me on the floor, offering her arm for immediate support. Aunt Paula joined her right away, and together they helped lift me carefully back into the wheelchair with steady and gentle hands to avoid any further discomfort. The earlier festive atmosphere had evaporated completely, leaving behind a thick tension that filled every corner of the spacious penthouse from the dining area to the large windows overlooking the water. Doctor. Hale turned his attention directly to Brielle and asked whether she fully understood the seriousness of what had just occurred in front of witnesses. He referenced the specific protections provided by the Americans with Disabilities Act and described how public physical force combined with verbal doubt of a diagnosed medical condition could lead to both civil liability claims and possible criminal review depending on the circumstances. His voice stayed measured and factual throughout the explanation without any emotional elevation or personal judgment. Dad rose from his chair near the Christmas tree and attempted to interject by claiming the family had only intended to motivate visible improvement through direct conversation during the holiday setting. Doctor. Hale responded by asking for clarification on how physical disruption of mobility equipment aligned with genuine motivation efforts, and reminded everyone that verified medical records existed to guide such family discussions, rather than subjective personal opinions alone. He then reached into his bag and retrieved a printed copy of my most recent scan report, which he held up briefly to illustrate the documented extent of the spinal cord damage visible on the images. The relatives who had participated in the earlier laughter now stood in awkward silence, shifting their weight uncomfortably and avoiding direct eye contact with one another. Or with me. Brielle crossed her arms tightly across her chest and muttered a partial denial of intent, but the previous strength had clearly left her posture and voice. Dad looked toward Mom, seeking some form of alignment or support, but she remained focused entirely on adjusting the wheelchair position and ensuring my immediate physical comfort after the fall. Doctor? Hale suggested calmly that the gathering should begin to wind down for the evening to allow adequate space for everyone to reflect on the sequence of events that had unfolded. He offered to remain available afterward for any legitimate medical questions the family members wished to ask in a proper setting, but made it clear that the incident itself required appropriate handling through established channels outside the current holiday context. The blinking multicolored lights on the Christmas tree created an odd visual contrast against the now subdued and serious mood that had taken complete control of the entire condo space. I sat upright in the wheelchair, once more feeling the full weight of the moment while the medical truth received official recognition from an external professional authority in front of the entire group. The doctor's timely and precise words had altered the entire dynamic within minutes and made the previous accusations and laughter sound increasingly hollow by comparison. Brielle tried one more time to regain some ground by questioning why the doctor had chosen that exact moment to intervene and speak up. Doctor. Hale explained calmly and factually that Mom had extended the invitation several weeks earlier in her capacity as both a longtime colleague from charity events and a concerned family member, and that he had witnessed the entire sequence of events from his unobtrusive position near the entrance. The additional detail added another layer of visible discomfort for those who had actively joined in the earlier reactions and comments. Dad suggested moving the remaining discussion to a more private area of the condo to continue talking, but Dr. Hale recommended addressing the immediate concerns openly, while all parties were still present to maintain full transparency for everyone involved. The group remained scattered between the dining table and living room area, with conversations now reduced to low murmurs and uncertain glances exchanged among the guests. The doctor reiterated the core principle that verified medical diagnoses deserve the same level of respect as any other important family matter, and that individuals with disabilities required the same consideration and protection as others in shared social settings. His closing remarks lingered noticeably in the air as the Christmas Eve gathering that had started with celebration and high spirits now faced a completely different resolution than any of the attendees had anticipated when the evening began. The silence after Dr. Hale spoke lasted only a few seconds before voices erupted from multiple directions at once. Dad immediately challenged the doctor's assessment and claimed the entire situation had been blown out of proportion by an outsider who did not understand family dynamics. Brielle backed him up by insisting that her action came from genuine concern rather than any intent to cause harm, and that the family had been dealing with my condition for 2 years without needing external medical intervention at every gathering. Their combined defense created a defensive front that pushed back against the doctor's factual statements and tried to reframe the incident as a simple misunderstanding among relatives. Mom stood up from beside the wheelchair and confronted them directly by asking how pushing someone onto the floor could ever be considered helpful or motivational. Aunt Paula supported her sister and added that laughing along with the comments had made the situation even worse because it publicly humiliated a family member in front of witnesses. The two women positioned themselves clearly on one side of the argument while Dad and Brielle remained on the other, creating a visible split that divided the remaining people in the condo. I reached for my phone and began dialing the non-emergency police line to report the physical contact as assault on a person with a disability. Brielle reacted instantly by trying to grab the phone from my hand, but Mom stepped between us and told her to stop immediately. Dad raised his voice again and warned that involving authorities would destroy any remaining family unity and create permanent records that could affect everyone's professional lives in the future. Dr. Hale stayed calm and offered to provide a written medical statement if needed for the report. He explained that documenting the event properly protected everyone, including those who had witnessed it, and could prevent future incidents of the same nature. His offer only heightened the tension as Brielle accused him of turning a private family matter into a legal case for personal reasons. Aunt Paula suggested that everyone sit down and discuss the trust documents and inheritance issues that had triggered the original argument earlier in the evening. Dad rejected the idea and stated that the current focus should remain on resolving the immediate conflict without bringing financial matters back into the conversation. The argument shifted rapidly between the physical push and the underlying family resentments that had built up over months of disagreements about assets and support responsibilities. Mom called a local attorney friend who specialized in disability rights cases and put the phone on speaker so the group could hear the initial advice. The attorney confirmed that pushing a wheelchair user constituted potential assault and recommended filing a report as soon as possible to preserve evidence while memories remained fresh. Brielle protested loudly against the suggestion and claimed the family could handle the matter internally without involving lawyers or police that would only escalate costs and embarrassment. I spoke up for the first time since the fall and stated clearly that I would not accept any further attempts to dismiss my medical condition or use physical force to prove a point. The words hung in the air and caused another wave of uncomfortable silence before Dad tried to negotiate by offering to cover any medical expenses related to the incident if everyone agreed to keep it within the family. Mom rejected the proposal outright and insisted that accountability required proper channels rather than private financial arrangements. The condo filled with overlapping arguments as Brielle accused me of using the wheelchair as leverage for greater inheritance share, while Dad supported her view by referencing past conversations about equal contributions. Aunt Paula countered by reminding them that medical documentation existed independently of family opinions, and that ignoring it had already led to this confrontation. The back and forth continued for several minutes, with voices growing louder until Mom finally raised her hand and demanded that everyone lower their tone before the neighbors complained. Doctor? Hale excused himself politely after providing his contact details once more and left the gathering to allow the family to handle the immediate emotional fallout. His departure left the remaining members facing each other with raw emotions and no clear resolution in sight. Brielle grabbed her coat and headed toward the door while muttering that the evening had been ruined by unnecessary drama and external interference. Dad followed her but stopped at the entrance to deliver one final comment about the importance of family loyalty over outside opinions. Mom remained beside me and helped adjust the blanket over my lap while Aunt Paula began quietly clearing the remaining glasses and plates from the tables. The Christmas lights continued to blink in the background, but the festive mood had completely vanished, leaving only exhaustion and division in its place. The party that began with holiday cheer ended in complete disarray as the first guests had already left and the core family members now stood divided along clear lines of support and opposition. The immediate consequences of the push had created fractures that extended far beyond the physical incident itself and set the stage for more serious actions in the coming days. 3 months after that Christmas Eve dinner, the official court documents arrived in my mailbox. The civil lawsuit against Brielle for assault on a person with a documented disability had progressed exactly as my attorney had outlined, and evidence included Dr. Atts. Hale's comprehensive medical report, sworn statements from Mom and Aunt Paula as direct witnesses, and the police report filed the same night. Florida courts apply strict standards under the Americans with Disabilities Act, combined with state statutes that protect individuals with mobility impairments from physical interference. Brielle hired a defense attorney who argued the push qualified as an accidental expression of frustration rather than intentional harm. The court reviewed cell phone video recorded by one relative during the incident and determined the force applied to the wheelchair was deliberate. The judge ruled in my favor and ordered Brielle to pay compensatory damages for both physical trauma and emotional distress, along with covering all legal fees incurred. Dad attempted to resolve the matter privately by offering a large cash settlement from his personal savings to avoid any public record. I rejected the proposal completely and instructed my attorney to pursue the maximum allowable judgment through the formal process. That decision marked the final severance of communication between Dad and me. Mom filed paperwork for legal separation from Dad within weeks, citing years of accumulated differences that had become irreconcilable after he repeatedly dismissed medical evidence in favor of Brielle's perspective. She relocated to a smaller unit closer to Aunt Paula and began establishing independent routines free from the previous household tensions. Brielle received a misdemeanor conviction on her record that impacted her professional licensing requirements and limited future employment options in her industry. The judge also issued a no-contact order preventing direct communication with me for a period of 2 years. The financial judgment against her reduced her portion of the family trust during subsequent mediation sessions. I arranged the sale of the Florida condo unit I had been using and relocated permanently to a ground floor accessible apartment in another state equipped with wider doorways and community resources designed for spinal injury recovery. The new environment allowed uninterrupted focus on prescribed physical therapy sessions without external family pressure or inheritance-related conflicts. Aunt Paula maintained consistent contact and assisted with coordinating the moving logistics, while Mom visited regularly to provide practical and emotional support during the adjustment period. Their steady involvement illustrated the difference between conditional family ties and unconditional acceptance grounded in respect for medical reality. The family trust underwent court-supervised revision to reflect the changed circumstances. Brielle's allocated share decreased proportionally based on the documented pattern of behavior and the resulting legal penalties. Dad retained authority over his remaining assets, but the overall distribution now incorporated protections for documented medical needs rather than equal division by default. I launched a private online support network for adults navigating temporary or permanent disabilities alongside family skepticism. Membership grew steadily as participants exchanged experiences of doubt followed by validation through professional evidence. Contributing to the group transformed the painful Christmas Eve memory into a source of practical guidance for others facing similar challenges. The fractures created that night proved permanent and irreversible. No holiday messages arrived from Dad or Brielle during the following season, and I made no effort to initiate contact. The complete absence of reconciliation attempts confirmed that certain relationships could not survive when built on denial of verifiable facts. My recovery advanced at a measured pace under Dr. Hale's ongoing remote supervision. The wheelchair remained essential for longer distances, but I achieved greater confidence with short, independent transfers in controlled environments. Each milestone carried deeper satisfaction because it occurred without the constant need to defend my condition against close relatives. The entire sequence reinforced one central truth: medical evidence combined with legal accountability ultimately outweighs personal denial and collective pressure within a family. Enforcing firm boundaries and pursuing justice through established systems protected both my physical health and mental well-being in ways that any forced compromise would have undermined. The original family unit that assembled for Christmas Eve dinner no longer existed in its previous configuration. The relationships dissolved along clear lines of acceptance versus rejection of documented reality. I emerged from the process with greater self-reliance and a support circle based on mutual respect rather than obligation or skepticism. 3 months after the events of that night, the final legal documents closed the chapter completely. The consequences for those who chose denial remained real and lasting, while my path forward emphasized truth, protection, and personal agency. The experience delivered a lasting lesson about the value of boundaries and the strength found in standing firm when family loyalty conflicts with medical facts.